My name is Keaton. I'm working on a game called City of the Shroud. City of the Shroud is a real-time tactical RPG with fighting game mechanics and a player-driven narrative. So City of the Shroud is a real-time tactical RPG. The two main components of the game are its real-time fighting strategy system, and then the other side of it is the RPG mechanics. So like the full narrative, the story mode, and also in addition to that we have an online versus mode, so it's kind of a 1v1, pit your team and set up against another player. And just how those interact with each other and sort of create an experience. So the main objective of the game is to play it and make choices in the narrative and in the story. Who you ally with, do you lie to them, do you tell them the truth? And sort of feed into that world and affect the world, because that's what we're going to use to write new chapters of the story. So by playing the game and engaging with the narrative, you're influencing the experience that everyone else who plays the game is going to have, and they're all influencing it for you. So sort of the main thing is to play through it, but as you're doing so, play through it in a way where like you are expressing what you would want to see happen in the story. So choosing the people you want to ally with, deciding whether they are trustworthy or not, those sorts of things. And so players who do that, I think, are going to get the most impact out of the experience. So the story behind the name is we had this concept of a city that had been sort of trapped inside of something. And so we were like, okay, we wanted sort of a Ray Bradbury, ordinary people in an extraordinary situation setup. And so we thought, okay, what if we have this city that's kind of a powder keg, and then we introduce this extraordinary thing and watch what happens. So we had this city, and then we had this thing that trapped people inside, and we were kind of looking around for words, and the word shroud really stuck out, because it's sort of, the city is sort of doomed, and it's not a good situation. The game itself isn't that dark, but it felt like a really good term to kind of capture the essence of what we wanted this barrier to convey, that like if this stays here, this city is doomed. And so City of the Shroud was sort of a natural extension of that. So I got my start in game development working at Capcom Japan. I worked there for about 4 years as a production manager, and then I went indie in order to move to England with my wife, and so that I could sort of follow her around instead of being long distance, because we did that for 5 years, and that was tough. So now we've been together for a while now, and I get to be an indie dev, which is kind of amazing. I played a lot of the console JRPGs. So, you know, the Chrono Triggers, the Final Fantasy VIs, the Legend of Legaias, and the Vanguard Bandits, games that most people have not heard of. But you should definitely check out and play, because they are classics. And I just sort of followed that trajectory. Half my library, unsurprisingly, is Capcom games, like Mega Man X, all of them. And I just sort of grew up playing a lot of that stuff, so that's really influenced my design choices, the aesthetics that I like, and the sort of approach to mixing narrative and gameplay that we're taking with City of the Shroud. So I originally went back to play Final Fantasy Tactics a few years ago, because I was jonesing for that, and I started playing it, and I realized just how slow it is. And I've gotten older since I was in high school, and I wanted something that was a little bit faster and kind of kept me engaged on like a high level for short periods of time, just because that's sort of the stuff that I have gravitated towards over the years. So I thought, well, games like this don't really exist yet, so why don't we just try making one? And that sort of kicked off the whole how do we make a strategy game feel like an action game bit. So one of the big ones was Legend of Legaia. I really liked the way they handled blending fighting game mechanics and RPG combat. Obviously, Final Fantasy Tactics was another big one. And then also Street Fighter, Soul Calibur, that sort of thing. We looked at a lot of the mental stuff that happens around fighting games and some of the more fundamental input mechanics, and we tried to adapt those in a way that would fit the sort of real-time strategy genre we were working on. We wanted to set the game in kind of a desert environment, and that's purely because I like deserts. And so we looked at stuff that, we looked at architecture that you find in dry cultures and climates. So we looked at places like Morocco and Turkey in the American Southwest, and sort of blended those together in a way that we think creates a really distinct, but still believable environment. It's still a fantasy environment, but we wanted to sort of look at what people do, and because I grew up in a really dry climate, and so I wanted to sort of capture that essence and put it into a game. So the game is for anyone who's interested in experimental narrative structures, who is interested in sort of a faster take on strategy gaming, and anyone who's looking for something that's a little bit different than anything else that's out there. Throughout the show, we've been getting a lot of feedback from players that the game, even though it feels familiar and it's easy to pick up, it is different than kind of anything else that people have found before. So if you're looking for something kind of a new genre, not a genre, but like a new way to play something, that's something that we're targeting. So this is our first game as a studio. I used to work at Capcom Japan. I shipped about 6 titles that I worked on directly in at least some capacity, a few more that never came out, etc. So I've kind of done the producing and shipping a game thing in various phases at various times, but this is sort of the first project where I have creative input, and it's riding on our shoulders as a team instead of being more of a cog in the machine to get a product out the door. So there's a core team of 6 people, and then in addition to that, there are all of the partners that we've worked with on the game so far. So probably 20 to 30 pairs of hands have touched the game at any given point, but there's always been sort of that core team of us. So we started working on the game after I went independent about 4 years ago, a little under 4 years ago. In that time, we worked on another project on contract for a bit while sort of developing the prototype and concepts for this. And then after that, we spent a little bit of time doing full-time work to get the core systems established. And then after that, it turned into a nights and weekends indie project. I've been on it mostly full-time, but that's because I'm doing all of the contract work to raise money to pay for the game. And so in that sense, it's been one person full-time for about, 3 years or so. And then in addition to that, we've kind of had people working on it when they can find the time, as well as working with partners and collaborators who are external, but like freelance programmers that I met and companies that I used to work with, etc. The game is coded in C#. We use Unity as our game engine. So we're currently on 5.5, I think. So as Unity told me to my face, the ancient past, but it's stable and our game is coming out soon. So yeah, we're gonna play it safe and get the game done rather than try and go for a bunch of features that we don't currently need to use. Most of the art was done in Maya. Some of it was done also in 3ds Max. So, standard industry 3D modeling programs. Oh, tons. You always learn a lot on any indie project, and when you're doing everything yourselves. So we've learned new production techniques. We've learned how to do a lot with very little. We've learned tons of design. We've acquired tons of design knowledge. It's just been a massive, massive learning experience. The first time we took the game to a game show, it was early days. The game didn't have final art. We were still sort of working out how the UI was going to be assembled. And we have this very different combat system. And so all of those things together meant at that point the game was very confusing. So we take it to this show, and the first person to sit down and play this game in public is a 4-year-old girl and her dad. And her dad is watching, and the girl is sitting there like trying to figure out how our combo wheel works. And I showed her how to use a move called Magnetic Mine, which puts a mine on the field, and anyone who runs past it, it levitates off the ground and chases them down and explodes. And she thought that was the coolest thing. And we had an internet connection at that show, so we were doing online versus. So I was the opponent, and she was like basically just using the mine. So she just ran around laying mines all over this field as I like took characters and just ran through them and tried to outrun the mines for as long as I possibly could. She played the game for about 45 minutes. She loved doing this so much. And the dad was running one of the merchant booths, and so he's like, the show is opening, we need to go. And so he picked her up and they walked off. And so I was like, oh, okay, well that was really good, because we just had our first person play the game and she really loved it. And then she came back at the end of the day as we were cleaning up and was like, I want to play again. And her dad was like, I'm so sorry. I was like, no, this is the best thing that could have possibly happened. So I really like remembering that story just because it was really cute. This is my first time showing a game at PAX, yes. It's also my first time in the Indie MegaBooth, and the first time showing a game that I have made directly. Yeah, PAX has been a lot of fun. I would definitely like to do this again. It's wild. I mean, obviously, it's really crowded, but it's great. We're getting tons of people playing the game. They're having a great time. It's a really good collection of people. We were at dinner last night, and the waiter came over and he was like, we love it when PAX is in town because the people who go to PAX are the nicest people. And that's definitely been our experience here at the show. So we have a Steam page set up. If you just search City of the Shroud, usually the Steam page is the first thing that comes up. That's probably the best bet. It's got all our trailers, screenshots, game description. You can wishlist the game. Otherwise, our website is www.abyssalarts.com, and that also has a ton of information about the game, trailer, etc. So either of those are good. You can find it there are a bunch of articles that we've had the luck, and my wife always tells me I underpitch things. We've been covered by a lot of websites, so also if you search for our game, we'll probably pop up and you can kind of read about what other people have had to say. Thankfully, that coverage has been pretty positive, so yeah, definitely give it a check.